So I was tasked with kind of a challenge to integrate more technology into our account and territory management class, which is in this sales school. And they said, how can we better prepare our students to be, better learners with technology, integrate technology into the coursework, but also as soon as they jump out and are graduated, will they have technology background to say and put on their resume, do I have this technology or this experience with maybe Salesforce or some sort of CRM, customer relationship management tools that will then better help them integrate into the job after graduation.
I did an internship with a pharmaceutical company last summer, and that's all they use is iPads, apps. That's how they market their products. So it prepared me for the future, since we're focusing more on technology, to be ready to use an app, present to a company, and show that technology rather than bringing a briefcase of papers. So using it in the class was more fun to learn about it because I know I'm going to be able to use it in the future.
This technology hosts a lot of fun. Students need to realize that technology is being integrated into the workforce. So they'll not only have to speak with their boss sometimes if they're a traveling sales rep, or if they're even a stay-at-home worker, they can use this technology to talk with their boss about sales pipeline, sales statistics, where they're going, maybe some daily activities. So if they're not maybe reporting with a CRM tool at home, bosses can then just hurry up, get on Skype or get on the GoToMeeting, show me some of the documents that you've been working with. And we've already practiced this in the classroom, so it's a really easy transition to the workforce for the student. So the final project in the class that I had the students work on is actually a virtual role play. And we use the app GoToMeeting to help the students virtually practice meeting in one state or another with their boss. So the project actually calls for the student to act as a sales rep for a financial institution. And they have to meet with their boss to basically state why or why not they should spend more time with a customer who's already getting a lot of time currently.
What we did with our presentation was present a new idea as far as doing a joint venture with a company to benefit the current company we were working with, which was a financial company. Our idea was a joint venture with Huntington Bank to add on a college savings account for Great Lakes Financial.
So it was called the GoToMeeting app, and it's really cool because we were in a different room and we actually just did like a video with Laura Kramer, and she was in the other room. So it was a role play, and in the app you can share documents. We actually made our own PowerPoint, and then we uploaded the PowerPoint into the GoToMeeting app. And so we shared the screen so that she could see the app, and then we could also see the app as well. And then we just went through the PowerPoint, and she got to listen to it as we did our presentation. And I think it was really cool to just know that she could see the PowerPoint, and then we could also see it as well.
There actually could be a Robin Chase sitting in my classroom today, and I would hope for her or him that they look at the things we're doing in the class with technology, and they think, oh, it's not just a traditional face-to-face role play. We've added a tool, and we've added an efficient way, or we've thought outside of the box to get this problem solved, or to find a new way to do business and to be creative with our solutions, our end solutions, that the customer looks and says, I never thought of that before. But because of the tools that we have today, the students are using them, they're being excited about the product, or they're excited about the tools that we provided them. And they say, I don't have to conform maybe to what I've always done before, but now I have these tools at my hand, I know how to use them, and also I can teach others how to use them. I think that's the ultimate end goal, is if they've learned something through technology or through this course, that they can now teach somebody else, and they can experience, you know, the ease or the excitement behind the technology.
All right, so I'm just going to kind of go over the agenda of kind of the presentation that we have for you today.
Good evening, and welcome to our first event in the third annual Jessup Scott Honors College Distinguished Lecture Series. I'm John Barrett, Interim Provost and Executive Vice President for Academic Affairs at the University of Toledo, and I'm very excited about this year's lineup of speakers. But first, I'd like to thank our faculty jazz trio from the College of Communication and the Arts, Tad Weed, Jay Week, and Olman Piedra, for their great performance tonight. Additionally, I'd like to give special thanks to Kelly Moore, the new Interim Dean of the Honors College, as well as all the members of the University of Toledo community who have made this lecture series a success. Lastly, I'd like to thank you, the members of our audience, for attending tonight. As most of you know, the Jessup Scott Honors College Distinguished Lecture Series features change agents and thought leaders. Previously, we've showcased innovators and entrepreneurs in politics, education, entertainment, and business strategy. Later this year, we have 3 other exciting speakers that I'd like to make you aware of. On October 22nd, we have Richard Rousseau, American novelist, teacher, and winner of a Pulitzer Prize for his novel Empire Falls. On February 1st, we have Steve Wozniak, pioneer of the personal computer who co-founded Apple Computer with Steve Jobs. I do want to point out that will be in Nitschke Auditorium, not in Dorman. And on April 5th, we have Anne Bancroft, author, teacher, and the first woman to go to both the North and the South Pole. And now, it's my privilege to introduce tonight's distinguished speaker, Robin Chase. A transportation entrepreneur, Robin is the co-founder and former CEO of Zipcar, the largest car-sharing company in the world. Talk about thinking outside the box. She introduced the concept of car non-ownership to car-crazy America. Next, Robin flipped the model by founding Buzzcar, a peer-to-peer car sharing service in France. Buzzcar lets you rent your own vehicle to your neighbors so that you can cash in on your car's unused capacity. Additionally, she launched Go Loco, an online ride-sharing community. And Robin is co-founder and executive chairman of Venium, a vehicle communications company building a networking fabric for the Internet of Moving Things. She currently serves on the boards of Venium, the World Resources Institute, and Two Cows. She lectures widely around the world and online through TED Talks, and has earned numerous awards in the areas of innovation, design, and the environment. She's been featured in major media frequently, making the list of Time's 100 Most Influential People, Fast Company's Fast 50 Innovators, and Business Week's Top 10 Designers. Robin holds degrees from Wellesley College and MIT's Sloan School of Management. She was also a Harvard Loeb Fellow, so we're pretty lucky we were able to pry her out of Boston for an evening. She also received an honorary doctoral degree of design from the Illinois Institute of Technology. So what drives Robin Chase? I think we're about to find out. Please help me welcome her.
It's a pleasure to be here. It's the first time I'm coming to Toledo and the first time I've been in Ohio. So thank you for inviting me, because then I got to come. I realize that many of you might not even know what Zipcar is. Shocking to me. But if you're an entrepreneur, you are asked to you're asked to give your elevator pitch. And your elevator pitch is supposed to be, this very short, concise little description of your company. So it takes just a few minutes or so. And so here's this, I'm going to give you the elevator pitch, but I want to give you the context. When I was CEO of this brand new little startup called Zipcar, Goldman Sachs in New York had this conference, and they invited 500 women CEOs from around the country. And the women CEOs ranged from Fortune 500 companies to Robin Chase, whose company was about this big. And they had this, it started on like the 24th floor, and then we were going down to lunch on the 13th floor. And also among those women was the CEO of Enterprise Car Rental, which is the largest car rental company in the world. And so being my clever positioning self, when we went to the elevators, I was standing next to her at the elevator bank, and then she got into the elevator, and then I got into the elevator, and then the elevator doors shut, and she turned to me, she said, "So Robin, tell me, what is Zipcar?" And I thought, I'm in an elevator, and I'm gonna do an elevator pitch. So let me tell you the elevator pitch. So Zipcar parks cars throughout dense metropolitan areas for people to use by the hour or by the day instead of owning their own car. They make the reservation online or with their smartphone, which didn't exist when we started. That reservation gets sent wirelessly to the car. They walk to the car because, remember, they're throughout everywhere. And you open the car with your smart proximity card or the phone that unlocks the door, enables the ignition, and opens the billing record. And then you drive round trip and park back in that same reserved parking space. When it gets to a quarter tank, the person who's driving the car uses our fuel card and fills it up. So I want to tell you about Zipcar. This talk is going to come in two parts. The first part is going to be all about Zipcar and founding stories, which you will enjoy, and the second part is what I have been doing for the last year, which is thinking about the future and writing about the future. So I have a co-founder, and our 5-year-olds were best friends in kindergarten. She was German, and she went home to Berlin on vacation, and she was sitting in a cafe, and she looked across the street and saw a shared car across the street in Germany. She thought, wow, that's a kind of cool idea. And she came back, and now her children were at the beginning of first grade, and she talked to me because I had a business background. So she described this to me, and this is in the fall of 1999. And I really saw a light bulb went on over my head. This is what I personally wanted. I had 3 children. We had 1 car. We lived in the city, and my husband would take that car out to his job where it would sit in a parking lot for 8 hours a day. I only needed a car sometimes. I did not want to own it, maintain it, snow shovel it, pay for it. I didn't want to do that. I just wanted a car sometimes. And I also, the fall of '99, I knew, wow, this is what the internet is made for. People sharing a very specific thing really easily. And this is what wireless can make happen, that people can make the reservations online, and it can go from the cloud and open that car door. And so it was this three things, this application of technology at this moment that really was the light bulb. And when I think about how we used wireless, I would say at that time in the fall of '99, all the venture capitalists, and I had just been to my business school reunion, and everyone was talking about, wow, wireless is so cool, what are we going to do with it? But no one was doing anything. I hadn't known that. And so it turns out, I'd say Zipcar was wireless idea, consumer idea number 3. Like we had radios that we would listen to. 25% of the people had cell phones. And Zipcar was the third thing that was ever invented for actual everyday people to use wireless with. So I spent that fall writing the business plan. And I did research. I talked to my father-in-law over Thanksgiving dinner. What did he think? So it was at Christmas time that I felt ready to finally go outside and talk to an outsider about what they thought about this. And the person I chose to talk to was the dean of MIT's business school where I went, because he was a dean, and he had worked in marketing in the auto sector, was his thing. So we had sent him the 4-page business plan. We went up to his office. We're sitting there. What's he going to think? And he looked at it and he said, wow, this is terrific. You guys should go ask for 3 times as much money and go 4 times as fast. So we got out of that meeting, I would say really shaken, and I spent the next few days wandering around my house thinking, did I want to do this or did I not? And my children at that time were 6, 9, and 12. And my 12-year-old, because it was around Christmas time, we'd been talking about UNICEF and how much money it cost to save a child's life. So I'm wandering around the house, and she says, Mom, like, what's up? What is going on in your mind? You're not paying any attention to us. I can't figure out what's going on. Like, what have you got on your mind? And I said, you know, I'm thinking about starting a company, and either I can do it in a small way, in which case I'll still pay attention to you guys, or I'm going to have to go really big, and I probably won't be paying any attention to you as a parent. And she said, so if you did that, could that company get really big, and you could sell it, and you could make a lot of money? And I said, it's possible. And she said, and you could save a lot of children's lives? I said, yeah. She said, do it. So since she said okay, what's interesting as I just recount this next part is that we incorporated in January of 2000, and we had opened the service in June of 2000. So we did it in 6 months, and over that 6-month period, I only raised $75,000 up to launch, and I'm not an engineer. I look at that today, and I'm incredibly inspired. Like, I've never been able to do anything like that so amazingly quickly and so incredibly fast. And today we have tools to make that even faster and easier, that we had to build a lot of what today is just there. And it was really, Harvard Business School did a Zipcar case, and it's a required case for every first-year student. And it was when we were writing that case that I realized how incredible that was, and not only to remind you, this was an idea that came from Europe. And we saw it, and we applied technology in a brand new way. We rebranded it completely. And today, Zipcar is, and has been for the last 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, the largest car-sharing company in the world, where we have about 1 million people are sharing 13,000 cars parked across North America in every major city, 300 university towns. In the UK, they launched in Paris about 6 months ago, and they are also in Madrid and maybe in Vienna, I think. So let me tell you a little bit of that startup story. You know, the question is, how do you raise money? And I'm not an engineer, and how do you pay for things? It's all kind of improbable. So in February, so we incorporated in January, and in February, I invited at MIT, my business school class, the first person to become a millionaire, to have started a company and sold it, happened to be a woman. There were only 38 women in my class, happened to be a woman, and it was a friend of mine. So I had invited her over for dinner, and I was inviting her to ask her, how do you do this thing? What do I need to care about? Give me some advice. Who are good lawyers? What should I do? And I can remember this so distinctly because it was such a surprise to me. Over dessert, like we'd eaten, we're sitting at the table with dessert and coffee, and she goes to her husband and touches his hand, and she says, honey, how about if we give Robin $50,000 to launch that company? I was like, oh my God, my first fundraising. So it was really exciting. So got that in February. And I want to say I spent almost every penny on engineering, and I continue in all of my startups. I feel like I'm spending all my money in engineering, and everything else is catch as catch can. And my husband's an engineer, and it makes me mad. It makes me mad that I give all the engineers all the money. But remember that I'm not an engineer, and I was CEO. So there's some other skills. There are other quality skills to have. So today we talk about minimum viable product, and that wasn't a sentence, it wasn't an idea when I was doing it. But let me tell you how minimum viable product Zipcar was. In middle of April, I got one car, a Volkswagen Beetle, and I chose the Volkswagen Beetle, and I chose a lime green one because in 2000, the spring of 2000, Volkswagen had just introduced the new Beetle. So it was this very cute little car that was going around, and it was adorable, and there weren't many on the street. And I put a logo on the passenger car door, and that says zipcar.com with the logo, and on the bumper, the trunk, it says, wheels when you want them, zipcar.com. And when I made that decision, I got yelled at by all my marketing advisors. Like, people are going to feel like they're in a pizza delivery truck. No one's going to drive it with its logo, that stuff on there. And I want to say I said, you're wrong. I'm creating a company that's going to be really hip and cool, and everyone's going to want to everyone will feel proud that they're so smart financially that they're doing this. And I had put the logo on the passenger side door because I knew that the driver would not see it every time they got in the car. The driver would not even be thinking about it because they would get in and out of the driver's side. So this is like life learning that my husband's first car was a used car, and the passenger window didn't crank down, and it was summertime and incredibly hot, and he would drive to and from work happy as a clam. And then I would get in the car and say, you haven't fixed that window yet? And so that's how I knew. So all of your life experience comes into starting a company. I knew no one would see the logo on the passenger side door. So in order to reserve this one car that was parked in front of my house, you did go online, and you would see a little schedule for the car, like a calendar, and you could make the reservation into that calendar when it's free. But it had no connection to the car. You would walk to my house, and parked on the street was the car, and you would walk up the driveway and up the back steps and onto the porch, and you'd lift up the pillow, and the keys would be under the pillow on the glider. And you'd go into the car, and and you'd unlock it, and in the glove box was a piece of paper that would say, start time, stop odometer, stop odometer. And then you'd drive around trip, park it back in front of my house, put the keys away. And so that's what we did for the first 3 months while we were just testing out this idea. But I had 22 drivers that were now driving it, so I could start learning. And while that was happening, one day we got a phone call. And we got a phone call, and the person says, hi, I'm calling from the Associated Press. I saw one of your cars. Can I do it? And I'm thinking, one? Which one might that be? Only had the one car. And I used to tell this story and say, wow, we were so incredibly lucky that we launched with this story from Associated Press, and it was a shot that was heard around the world. Like, we got press every single place around the world. And a fellow CEO said to me, Robin, I hear you tell that story, and it makes me really mad. That was not luck. That was where luck is where preparation meets opportunity. That I had decided to have this beautiful little lime green car because I knew it was going to be visible, and I, against everyone's advice, had put this logo on the door. So indeed, but it was lucky they saw it. They saw it. And so we were 3 days from launch. I'm just trying to think. If I had a PowerPoint, I would tell you to know when you're starting a company, money comes from unexpected places. Luck is where preparation meets opportunity, and you can be really lucky. 3, start with a minimum viable product. You want to get as close to your customers as soon as you can. You want to make as light a thing as you can, and then start learning from your customers how to use it. And then let me tell you another luck story, and bad luck. So doing companies is very hard work because there's a lot of terrible, terrible things that happen. And one of those terrible things that happened was 3 days before we were going to open the service with 4 cars, I was getting 3 new cars in addition to the one, and open it up to the public as a whole. The lessor that I had been talking with for the previous month and making agreements with, 3 days before he said, oh, by the way, we've decided that for every car you're getting, you need to give us a $7,000 down payment security deposit. I thought, if I had $7,000 kicking around, well then wouldn't I just buy the car? And at that time, I only had $68 left in my bank account. I was prepared to launch the company with $68, and then I had this phone call 3 days beforehand that said, I needed $7,000 more per car, so I needed another $21,000. So instead of crying, I went to a cocktail party that was a launch party for some other company. Just not going to think about it. So I went to this party that I'd already promised to go to, and when I was at that party, an angel investor that I had been communicating with, he saw me across the room, and this is honestly how the conversation went. He comes up. So Robin, what can I do for you? He said, how are things going? What can I do for you? I need $25,000 by tomorrow morning. Done. It was this incredible thing. And so the next morning, literally at 9 a.m., I call the bank, and the bank says, your wire came in. I give $21,000 of the $25,000 to the leasing company. I get the cars delivered. We launch the company. It was a crazy thing. So we go along. We get all this great press. And another of my bullet point advice to entrepreneurs is to make yourself a learning company. The reason small companies beat up big companies is because we're really nimble and really fast. We don't have any money, but we can really learn fast. So what I learned very quickly, we had spent $15,000 with this idea of putting a device in the car where you would get in, you would get in like I told you with the key, with the card key, and then in the car you would put in your PIN number, and then it would say, is the car looking good? And you'd say, yes. And then you would drive around and say, do you want to extend your reservation? You would say, yes. Did you leave the car in good condition? Yes. So I thought deep in my heart that I had to be able to ask those questions, and I had to have this happening. Because remember, only 25% of the world had a cell phone, and only 50% of the people had internet access, which was at home. So of my $75,000, which I told you I sent $21,000 already to the other guys, I had absolutely no money. I gave $15,000 to someone to design this prototype that was sitting in the car when we had these early drivers. What I learned immediately was that you couldn't read the LED in the sunlight. Customers would not be able to figure out what the 4 questions meant. They would forget their PIN code. It was just this plagued us with all these problems. And so after a week, extremely heartbreaking to me, I had to say, you know what? We're ripping that out. We're not doing that. We're doing what you see with Zipcar today, which was you make the reservation online. All you do is you open the car door with this number. Everything else, if you need to call us, you're going to have to go find a payphone. You're going to have your own cell phone. We're not going to have any other communication in the car. And that decision, which we made very quickly after I realized how painful and awful it was, I think is one of the key reasons that Zipcar has been so spectacular, because it was this dead simple, really, really easy thing. So we went along, and what can I say? The company grew really, really well, 7 to 21% month over month. So if it was a 7% month growth, I was disappointed. If it was 21%, I'd say, yeah, we're so great. And we went from Boston and launched in DC to good luck versus bad luck. I launched in DC September 1st, 2001. And September 11th, I was in DC on the plane that did not get shot down out of Boston. It was a terrifying non-moment. My youngest daughter thought I was dead all day. But what was interesting from a business perspective is that all the travel and car rental completely collapsed. And Washington, D.C. was this little kind of shell of a scary place, as was Boston. And at the end of September, we had grown phenomenally for both cities and in Washington, D.C. So I got to call up my board members and say, see, I told you Zipcar is like a utility. It's something that people have to use, and they use it all the time, no matter what the context. It's not some lucky luxury thing. This is part of what people need to do. Then we launched in New York City in January of that year. So today, as I say, Zipcar is around the world. We've seen a lot of innovation since then. I really think that Zipcar was the cornerstone for American entrepreneurs and American venture capitalists, because what we proved with Zipcar is that people want access, not ownership, and that people are willing to share things, and the whole way that technology can make that sharing easy, and that the transportation sector is a very sexy sector. Before Zipcar, if we thought about transportation, there was two ways to innovate. One would be build public transportation or build a new bridge in some place, or else wait for the car manufacturers to make a brand new car. And we, with Zipcar, said, you know what, there's a brand new way to innovate, and that would be on behavior, and we completely transformed the industry. Today, likely not in Toledo, because my guess is all of you need a car to get to work. Zipcar is only for populations that don't need cars to get to work. And so it does work for students who are living on campus, so in these tight university towns, but where you are car dependent for your work, you will own a car. But in major cities, there are millions of people who are not car dependent, and this is a vastly cheaper, better way to own and use a car. I want to move into this next part of my talk, because what I learned from Zipcar and how I think about it really shapes what we're seeing in the world today in business. And so I spent the last year writing this book, a book called Peers Inc., that is describing this new organizational structure that changes how we create companies, how we work, and ultimately how we're building world economies. And that's what I want to talk about. And it really came from lessons from Zipcar early on that are really large. So if I think about why we succeeded at Zipcar, yes, I executed and my team executed really well, and yes, the trends were with us, and we paid a lot of attention, and we learned. We were a real learning company. Some things we had going for us. And one was this idea of excess capacity. The way that you could buy cars before Zipcar, the way you could consume a car, you had two options. One is you would buy a whole car. Whole car, it costs you $9,000 a year on average. It consumes 18% of household incomes, yet it is idle 95% of the time. It's the second most expensive thing you own after your house, idle 95% of the time. The second way you can consume a car is that you rent a car rental. And again, you have to buy it in these 24-hour bundles, even though you want it for 22 hours or for 26 hours. So in both ways that people were allowed to consume car travel before Zipcar, they had to buy more than they wanted. So I knew that if we could change the economics of that, if you could only pay for what you used, we were going to win from an economic standpoint, because we were leveraging this excess capacity that is flooding the market. The second thing we did is we built what I think of as a platform for participation. If you go to the car rental, the last time I rented a car was in Paris. I spent half an hour at the counter. And I think, haven't you learned, it's been 15 years since I started this company where you do it in 30 seconds. I do not understand why I'm standing here this time. So when I did Zipcar, I knew that if it was going to take you 30 minutes or 15 minutes to rent a car, it would never happen, because you can't rent a car for an hour. It's going to take you 15 minutes. So I knew we had to build this platform where you engaged. You did it. We took out the middlemen. We made something that was complex really simple. We boiled it down, and we gave the user the power that the company used to have before. So this platform for participation was a key facilitator and enabler for our whole business model. This would not work and did not work if it takes a long time to do that transaction. And the third thing we did is we thought about our customers as our members. And I've always called them members, and I really thought about them as collaborators. Back to the car rental. So in car rental, there's the counter, and I'm the company, and you're the customer. And the company's thinking, you know what? You are going to ruin that car, and you're going to scrape it, and you're going to stuff, this is true, a colleague I worked with car rental, and he said someone stuffed a hamburger into the air vent. So the car rental company definitely does not trust you. And you, on the other side of the counter, are looking at the car rental company and say, hey, you told me it's going to be $29.95 for a day, and now you want to upsell me, and you want to charge me for insurance, and you know, ding me on gas if I don't, whatever. And it's a very adversarial relationship. So Zipcar back in 2000 took away the counter and said, you know what, we're all in this together. We're going to rely on you to do all these things that we used to do. You're going to walk around the car and tell us if there's something the matter. You're going to use our fuel card that we're going to leave there for you to fill it with this quarter tank. You're going to tell us what kind of cars you want to drive, where we should park them, whether you're who to partner with. You are our collaborators. And this photo, which I find to be astounding every time I look at it, these are people leaving the hospital with their firstborn children, and they're saying, hey, wait a minute, let's take a photo and mail it to Zipcar. That was not on my mind when I was leaving the hospital with my firstborn. So we really were their partners and their collaborators. And here's a cartoon I found recently. So here's Moses coming down out of the mountain. Is there a section on the bottom for comments? That even with God, we see ourselves as co-creators, that we are no longer these passive, that we sit back, you know, I wait. And if you say this word consumer, does that feel like you? Consumer? Doesn't it feel kind of 1950? I don't feel like I'm a consumer. So these three things, excess capacity, people, and platforms, this is the organizational structure that I think of Peers Inc. And these people and platforms are totally inventing this collaborative economy and reinventing capitalism. This structure is one that all of these companies that we've been talking about and that have risen in the last 10 to 15 years, all of these companies are taking this shape. And you know, it's kind of remarkable to me when I think about Skype. Skype built a telecommunications company on the back of my computer, my internet connection, and my video camera. They didn't have to pay for any of that. I gave it to them, my excess capacity. We talked over dinner about the massive online open courses, MOOCs. It's leveraging excess capacity. If we think about the impending advent of 3D printing, that will be a Peers Inc. formulation. You know, OkCupid, Skype, I mean, all these things, all of these are, if we did not exist with our things and our data points, these companies are nothing. They are nothing without us. So the question is, what is happening? And I want to give you my favorite example. Whenever we think about excess capacity, it's actually sharing. Because if I'm going to deal with excess capacity, it's saying that I don't have control of that whole asset. I have to share it with somebody else. So if you're ever dealing with excess capacity, it means you're definitely dealing with sharing. And so the example I want to use is bed sharing. And I don't know if any of you guys in the audience have done any bed sharing. I have. I've done some bed sharing. I travel a lot. And when I go to new cities, I like to stay in people's excess capacity rooms. And you know, it could be their spare room that's also their office. If I'm really lucky, I get a double bed, way better. And if I'm unlucky, the teenagers have said, you go sleep on the couch so Robin can sleep in your room. And I think, ick, you know what? I don't want to do that. And that's why hotels were invented. And when I co-founded Zipcar, my staff wanted to call Zipcar car sharing. I'd say, you can't call it car sharing. A, when you say car sharing, no one knows what that means. You're still going to have to give 4 sentences explanation. And imagine if we called hotels bed sharing, because hotels are bed sharing. The hotel I'm sleeping in right now, tonight, many people have slept on that bed before, and many on that pillow. And I laughed today that the business model, Zipcar, was so disruptive and really transformed things. But in fact, Zipcar is to cars as hotels are to beds. It's on a 7-day week. How can you maximize your return on that asset? So I decided to go do some research. You know, what is the largest bed sharing in the world? And the Intercontinental Hotels Group. They've been around for 65 years, 645,000 rooms in 100 countries. And we can know that this is really, really hard work because Hilton is number 2. They've been around for 93 years and they haven't been able to do it. Some of you know what I'm going to say now. Airbnb, where you put your excess room or your apartment or your house up, in its 4th year, had the same number of rooms. And this is where I say, can you believe it? This transforms the world. This should terrify every sector of the economy that we can do something like that. This is revolutionary. It's terrifying, phenomenal, exciting. Couchsurfing, where no money transacts, in their 9th year, they had 2.5 million rooms that you could be staying at. So the question is, why is this happening? What has changed that we can knock out someone who's been doing this for 65 years in 4 years? Why did we create companies and governments? We created them to do things that we as individuals can't do. Like, that's why they exist. And so if we think about large investments, something that costs millions of dollars, don't ask me, Robin Chase, to do it. I don't have millions of dollars to spend on something like that. If it's going to be something that requires lots of kinds of intelligence, I'm smart at 2 things. If it requires 10 things, I can't do it. We have to have a company to do that. If we think about standards and demanding consistency, I, Robin Chase, can't make you do anything in a consistent manner because I am too puny an entity. You need to be some big, powerful company or government to say, got to do it this way. And this is kind of all bound up together in a brand promise, and these are typically global. But on the flip side, individuals actually are really good at things and way better at some things than companies. And I would say those are localization, customizing things, and specializing things. That's what we as individuals do naturally, because we're unique and we're local and we think about things in a very detailed way. Companies have done that, but they hate it. It's really expensive, they don't want to do it. And if you think of the last 100 years of industrialization, it was all about standardizing things, ripping out anything that was unique. If we put these 2 things together, it turns out that they're very, very complementary, the skills of each side of this equation. And because of the internet, this is what's changed. The internet makes dealing with lots of little parts really, really easy. That didn't used to be the case before. Companies used to have to deal with transaction costs, so they made companies as big as possible, putting every single thing inside the company to be really, really big to reduce transaction costs. Now the internet says that's no longer an advantage. You have to stick to doing what you do best. And so it's this new collaboration, this new organizational structure that I'm calling Peers Inc. Each side only does what it does best, and they leave the other side to do the other things. So the Inc., the big entity, they build a platform for participation, and the peers deliver this diversity of offering. And to make it simple, it's kind of, I feel like it's like a yin-yang, where it's very complementary and symbiotic, and if one side tries to take too much, the other side won't participate. And it's all swimming in this sea of excess capacity. So if we go through these things one by one, I love excess capacity because as an entrepreneur, it's really cost effective. And I also like it because it's really resource efficient. So how do I define excess capacity? It's something that already exists, it's been paid for, but there's some more value there. And once you can find this excess capacity, which is like a #1 go-to for anybody who's looking to do a startup or any company or university is trying to leverage its assets, look for excess capacity. When you find it, #1 thing you can do is slice it, and that's what Zipcar did. It took this big thing that you could only buy in a big way, and we said, you know what? We're going to offer up these little slices, you only have to pay as you go. 2, another way you can do it is you can aggregate lots of small parts, and that's what Airbnb did. It took 1 million little tiny places, and it pulled it together into this one on the platform, and it has a consistent guarantee, a common way of communicating and paying. You can compare and contrast. It has a totally different feel than 1 million different bed and breakfasts. And the third and the most incredible thing you can do is you can open that asset up and say, hey, you guys, what would you do with this? And my example here would be the open data movement. So open data is when you have your data set that you've collected for your company or for your institution or for your government, and you make a common application programming interface, API, and you say, what could you do with this? So examples would be, the US government started this, led with this, about 5 years ago. 40 countries have opened up their internal government data sets, 1 million of them, And in this McKinsey report, they say, you know what, we're going to find there's $3 trillion worth of value there. So this is brand new, made out of thin air value, out of something that already existed. And it was already collected by the governments for their own uses. They were happy with it. They were happy with what happened, and they found this brand new value. So let's look at the Inc. side. So the Inc. builds the platform for participation, and what I love about platforms is their platformness. They are made to organize things. They are made to make complex things simple. They are made to give the power of the corporation or the power of the government to the individual, which is what we all have now. In many, many platforms, we are given the power of the corporation and the power of the government. And because it's a platform, it can deliver all those fabulous economies of scale that capitalism brought. So all the big, high volume stuff I get through the platform, and it can have very high growth because it's so standardized. So here's an example, Etsy. So Etsy, I think of as a Peers Inc. organization. It's a marketplace of people who make stuff and people who buy them. In 2013, they grew by 50%. In 2014, another 40%. And this growth curve is very, very common for these Peers Inc. companies, because it takes a long time to get that platform right. You have to do a lot of iterating, a lot of thinking and learning and listening. Once you get it right, and once you've made it really simple, everyone comes on top simultaneously. Here is BlaBlaCar. This is a ride-sharing company that's in Europe, which means I want to go from Paris. I personally am driving from Paris to Brussels in my own car. I have 3 empty seats of excess capacity, and I'm going to sell those seats to other people to go. Their tail, they were actually launched in 2006, so they have a little bit longer tail, but you can see it's got the same characteristic. It took them a long time to get it together and to figure out how to do it. Today, they move 4 million people every month, which is the same as 10,000 high-speed trains or 10,000 747s. And they move those 4 million people without laying a train track, without buying a rail car, without buying a plane, all on excess capacity. Look at that. They are the European train's #1 competitor right now. Let's look at what the peers deliver. The peers deliver diversity. And when I went to business school in the 80s, I felt it was like blah, 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 diversity, I'm politically correct, blah, 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 I'm going to say it. Now I want to tell you, deep in my soul, it is diversity that is what delivers the magnificence of this business model. Because it's diversity that delivers all the creativity and all the innovation comes from this wealth of things. It delivers resilience. If you think about hotels versus Airbnb, your one hotel, if it is crushed by, I don't know, a hurricane, you're done. Whereas in Airbnb, if one host doesn't answer an email, so what? There's another person. So, and it delivers this incredible redundancy and resiliency. So if we think about the diversity piece, for me, smartphones and apps are platform for participation and the peers. If we think about, it's excess capacity in many, many ways. So if you think about you bought your smartphone for $600, and it's worth it, you will have bought that smartphone for 2 or 3 applications. But there are millions of applications that don't have to force you to buy the smartphone. You've already bought it. They're free riders. Whether it's worth $1 to you or $10, it doesn't matter because you've already sunk your $600. So they're free riding. Then to the creators of those apps, they're free riding on the much greater expertise it took to build a smartphone. As an app maker, I don't have to be clever in embedded systems, in manufacturing things in the millions, in Chinese supply chains, in merchandising and marketing to the millions. I don't have to do that. All I have to come up with is take my life's experience and my work experience, come together in an idea and make this one very discrete thing an app, which is why we've got all this diversity. This is a growth curve of the number of apps since the smartphone was invented, which is 2008, so now 6-7 years. There have been more than 2 million apps in those 7 years, which I haven't done the research, but my guess is it's one of the highest 7 years of creativity ever the world has ever seen, because it was tens of thousands of people able to apply their unique, special life experiences on all the ways that you could use a cell phone. So the amount of diversity and the amount of innovation that comes out of this is phenomenal. Why I care about this Peers Inc. organizational structure is A, it's happening, and I think, okay, it's happening, but it delivers what I think of as 3 miracles. It has these attributes that are so powerful to me. They're incredible. And before I tell you about the miracles, I want to get you very, very depressed, so get ready to be very depressed. And then I promise to pull you back out of that depression. So the thing that depresses me the most is climate change. And this is a report by the World Bank, a very conservative financial institution. And this report says, by 2100, if every country does every single thing they promise to do, all their promises, they fulfill them, we will have plus 4 degrees centigrade, which is plus 7 degrees Fahrenheit, global average warming by 2100. If you're like me, what does it feel like to move plus 7 degrees average warming? I had no idea. So I went and did some research, and what I found out was the last time we were minus 7 degrees was the last ice age. So where I sleep in my bed in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I actually think where you sleep in your beds in Toledo, was under a mile of ice, several kilometers of ice. So if you want to know what it feels like to move 7 degrees warmer, it's sleeping underneath a mile of ice with the glaciers completely covering out North America to today. But we're going to go forward that amount in 85 years, not tens of thousands of years. So just picture that difference of heat going forward. When I read this report, when we talk about plus 7 degrees global average climate change, that's of course average. Over land, over North America, is going to be plus 11 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. Humans have never existed in these kinds of temperatures. None of the animals on the earth have ever existed in these temperatures. And that's if everyone does everything they promise to do. If countries fail on their promises, we'll be seeing that by 2060. So when people talk about, do this for your grandchildren, care about the next generation, by 2040, it's going to be ugly. And I'm planning to live 15 more years. So I feel like we are walking around in this world of schizophrenic sleepwalking, thinking that, some technology is going to save this. We're just going to get along, like it's not so bad. When scientists talk about catastrophic effects, they were saying that the difference between where we are today and what the plan is for 2100 is civilization, humans. Humans are clever, we'll have a couple 100,000 of us, a couple million of us, but we will not have where we are today, 7 billion. And the recent influx of climate refugees into Europe, this is the beginning of what it feels like to have drought and resource scarcity. So it's something that I can get very emotional about, but as you're sitting here and thinking about it, I want you to hold on to this fear and this horror and this anger, and we'll go through the other side, but it's not going to change unless you change it. So my friend Bami Banerjee at Stanford had this great sentence: you can't solve exponential problems with linear solutions. And I think that our approach to addressing climate has been very linear. We just keep thinking, we'll just do this little thing and then this little thing, and technology somehow, somewhere is going to fix it, but we don't have any time for that right now. We have to change this right now. And so I say, try Peers Inc. And if we talk about these miracles, so miracle number 1, because we're leveraging excess capacity, we can actually defy the laws of physics. And what do I mean by that? If in 2000, instead of launching Zipcar, I said, you know what? I'm going to build the biggest hotel chain in the world, and I'm going to beat them in 4 years. I'm going to beat the Intercontinental Hotels Group in 4 years. 650,000 rooms. Every one of you guys would have said, that's physically impossible. My husband would have said, you're crazy, and no venture capitalist would have ever financed me. It is physically impossible, Robin. You can't go find the land and design the buildings and finance it and build it and put the staff in it and put the furniture in it and get people to start using it and never ever once make a mistake and do it in 4 years. Physically impossible. So this is what business as usual asset building for hotels would have looked like. That's the pace, and this is what Airbnb did. And why did Airbnb do it? Because it was leveraging excess capacity, stuff that already existed right here and right now, and they could have it all put together on top of the platform. And this is what we need to do to address climate, is move at this kind of speed. Miracle number 2. Because we are building on platforms for participation, we can have exponential learning. If you think about learning, learning is how many times, how many iterations can I do something? And as an individual, I'm bound, constrained by my life, by a few things I can do. If I'm a company, we know we can get more iterations in there. But on the platforms, we can see tens of thousands and millions of iterations, and if we're clever, we can learn from them. So my example here is learning a language. This unit of measurement for learning a language is what can you learn in a semester of college, which is about 130 hours. It used to be that the Rosetta Stone was the #1 language learning thing, and if you had your boss paying or you were a diplomat, you would say, yeah, I'll spend that $1,000 to learn a language quickly, and only 54 hours. Wow, 54 hours, that's like so much better than taking it in a class. My new friend, new company, is called Duolingo, free online language learning. I was talking to the CEO, and he does A/B tests. He will say, if I ask someone this way, do they learn the answer better than if they do it that way? And so he says he can have an A/B test, and overnight, in 24 hours, he'll have 150,000 people take that test, and he'll know definitively which is the better way to do something to have someone learn. He's got it down to 34 hours on Duolingo will teach you a unit, a semester of college, of a language, which is really phenomenal. Down to 34. Clearly it's not going to go to 0. 34 is pretty amazing, but way better than 130. And here's his growth chart. He is just now about 3 years old, and 90 million users are using Duolingo. And to talk about excess capacity and my total, I honor this CEO. If you think about learning a language, it's English into French or English into Spanish, right? It comes in language pairs that you have to do it. A year and a half ago, he said, I have excess capacity in my process, the process of doing Duolingo. A year and a half ago, he opened it up and said, you can do this with any language pairs you want. You know, Balinese into Croatian, Czech into German. And of those 90 million, 45 million people are learning language pairs that the company didn't create. Another excess capacity. How do they make money? When you're learning French and Spanish, and you're getting good at it, he will throw in a sentence from BuzzFeed and from CNN for you to translate into French and Spanish, and he charges 3 cents a word, where the going market is 9 cents a word. And because he has so many people, remember, iterating, he delivers, his translations are more accurate than the individuals doing it. So that's how he makes his money. So this man is looking at excess capacity in every way and coming up with how can he extract value out of it. Miracle number 3. Because we are working with a diversity of peers, the right person will appear. And what do I mean by that? I look at Superman, I think, Superman, whatever, he's strong, he can fly, but everyone in this room is already better than Superman. Because we know what's the best way to get there? What's the weather going to be like there? What are the key issues? Who are the experts? I can go into Wikipedia, I can find out what the things are. And Superman, he's just like flying there. He's got no idea what's going on. So the example here, 6 months ago, or a little more than 6 months ago, Obama announced that he was going to reestablish relations with Cuba. Airbnb had 2,000 places to rent 6 months later. Imagine trying to be the Intercontinental Hotel Group and trying to match that. Within 6 months of just Obama saying, I think we're going to open relations, we have 2,000 places to stay in Cuba. Why? Because the right person was there in the right location and had the right assets. So the key thing to remember here is that Peers Inc. is a collaboration. It requires both sides to play. We can have exponential scale, we can scale exponentially because we have the platform that's organizing it and all the peers are simultaneously putting their co-investment in. We can tap exponential learning because the peers are doing their crazy ways that they do things and the platform is there to analyze and say, here's the best practice, let's do more of it, here's the worst practice, stop. And the right person will appear because the platform has been so attractive that, and organizes things so well that the right person the needle can fly out of the haystack. Oop, let me go back one. So far I've been really emphasizing what does it mean and why do companies want to do this? They want to do this because they learn faster and grow faster and innovate faster. This is going to happen. But what's it feel like to be the person who's working, the peer? If we think about your mom and my mom, what does she say to you when you get a job? She says, get a full-time job with benefits. And we know that you got to go get a full-time job because you want to get those benefits. And I think that was the correct thing to say when we thought we were all going to go get factory jobs or we were all going to go work in some office and you're going to have this one job. What I know today is, I heard this sentence from someone else, my father had one job in his lifetime, I'll have 6 jobs in my lifetime, and my children will have 6 jobs at the same time. We're moving into a world of, some people call it the gig economy or the freelancer economy. Today, 30% of Americans are working freelance in multiple jobs, and that number is growing. So when I look at this, get a full-time job with benefits, I'm actually a knitter, and it kind of feels to me like we're saying, you know what, you, the smallest economic unit, the smallest and most fragile economic unit, you only get to have one revenue source. But if you're a university, and if you're a company, and if you're a country, let me tell you, it's all about having multiple sources of revenue. It's a crazy thing that we tell individuals who are the tiniest little thing. Nope, you can only have one type of job, and you're either employed or unemployed. You either have the boss who hires you or you're unemployed. In the Peers Inc. economy, we're going to be a 6-ply income. We're going to be much more resilient and strong. We're going to have lots of ways to earn money, and we're going to be able to have incredible flexibility, which is what everyone who works as a freelancer absolutely adores, is that they get to work when they want to work. They get to work as much as they want to work. They get to earn as much as they can. And I see it that we'll be having, some jobs will be our passion jobs, and some jobs will be our money jobs, and if you're lucky, your passion and your money works together. But we'll have lots of different things going on. And this really is this huge transformation. There is a huge downside to this, is that we've spent the last 150 years industrializing and tying all of our benefits to full-time employment. So all the social safety nets and workplace rules that make it safe for you to work have all been tied to full-time employment. Yet we're moving to this place where, as I said, we already have 30% of the people who are working independently, and we'll be having more. So that's a very nerve-wracking thing, and we have to shift our rules and benefits to to match the new way of working. And also if we share productivity gains. And so what do I mean by that? These Peers Inc. way of organizing is dramatically more productive. That's what I've been showing lately. And we're going to see huge productivity gains because we're ripping the middlemen out of everything, and it's just you and the platform going forward. But look at how we've been doing this in the past. This chart is showing that from 1970 on, the productivity gains have not been reflected in hourly compensation. And there's, in the press these days, people talk about the sharing economy, and they say, the sharing economy is like screwing up workers' lives, and they're really getting screwed. And I want to say, you know what? This has been happening, and the sharing economy is just a few years old, so don't be blaming the sharing economy. Like, this has been a trend that's been happening for quite a while. But the sharing economy and this Peers Inc. way of working will definitely be making it worse. Then I was reading a study by economist Pavlina Cherneva, and she was looking at which groups get the benefits during big economic expansions. And I'm going to give you the 2 data points. So one was the earliest one she studied, 1949 to 1953. This is post-World War II expansion. The top 10% of Americans received 20% of the economic gains. Seems okay. Top 10%, take 20%, it seems fine. Let me go back. The most recent, after a post-2008 crisis, so 2009 to 2012, the top 10% of Americans took 116% of those gains. The bottom 90% slid back 16%. That sounds terrible. It is terrible. The top 1% took 95% of the gains. So we're moving ahead into an increasingly income inequality. And when I think about this Peers Inc. world, everything that can become a platform is going to become a platform. We're all going to become independent workers. So we really need to care about how these benefits and this productivity gains get shared. I want to close. So I believe firmly that we're moving from what I think of as industrial capitalism, where things were on this large scale, where companies had a very strong, thick boundary between what was inside the company and what was outside the company. And they would protect what was inside the company with patents and copyrights, trademarks, certifications, and if you wanted to get in, you had to pay a lot of money to get that stuff. Very hard line with companies, hard line that created the boundaries of companies. And we're moving to what I think of as the collaborative economy, whereas there's this really strong collaboration, and the line between company and worker and who's in the company, who's out, is much, much more blurred. And that's the future for 4 reasons that I'll give you now. And for me, each one of these is completely 100% true. And that's why I feel with such confidence that we're going there. So as I say these, and during the Q&A, which may or may not include you, I feel free to challenge me. So if I think about assets, things, shared networked assets always deliver more value than closed proprietary ones. And we know they do that 2 ways. One is that assets used more efficiently, or 2, brand new value is extracted out of it. So if we think about Zipcar, which we talked about, much more efficiently used, or if we think about the open data movement, where this old stuff is getting brand new values thing stuck in. So shared networked assets always deliver more value than closed proprietary ones. If we think about minds, all the people in this room, no matter how smart you are in this room, we know that there's more smart people outside. We've always known that. But before, we couldn't get them. Today, we can find and reach out to those people. More networked minds are always definitively smarter and more creative than a few small group. It's just true. It's just what it is. If I think about it from an incentive as a company or a university or a government, the benefits and opportunities of shared open assets are always greater than the problems associated with shared open assets. So when I did Zipcar, when I was trying to raise money, my VCs would say, "Oh, people are going to ruin the cars, you can't trust them, it's going to screw up, you never can do it." That was true. But today, 1 million people are sharing 13,000 cars. The very small percentage of people who are jerks and idiots and do bad things and don't tell us, we can find them and we penalize them, and when they're really bad, we kick them out. If we think about Wikipedia, when Wikipedia was started, people would say, "That's never going to work. You're going to find lies. People are going to find a page and they're going to scribble, scrabble, and do graffiti over it." That's true. We can identify that. It's a very discrete problem, and we have 4.8 million entries in the world's encyclopedia. And then lastly, from a very self-interested, me, only me point of view, I will participate, because when I do, I always get more than I give. I make 2 hours of reservations a month on Zipcar, and I have a fleet of 13,000 cars parked across the world that I can get into. I edit 2 lines of Wikipedia, and I have the world's encyclopedia. I always get more than I give with these things. So if I think about the pace of change in the world today, that we're moving really, really fast, technology is moving fast, the climate is moving fast, geopolitics is moving fast, it's a very nerve-wracking, highly dynamic time. The Peers Inc. structure is the only thing that allows you to experiment, iterate, adapt, and evolve fast enough to catch that. And so that's why it is the future, and that's why I'm happy it's the future, but we have to shape that, the direction we want to go. And so I wrote a book which will be for sale outside. I'm happy to sign it. But for me, what's really important is that these ideas need to be bestsellers, because this transition is happening, and we need to leverage it to take the future the direction we want. Thank you.
Robin, I want to thank you for a very interesting talk. I have to say I had some questions from the students beforehand, and I've scribbled all over it just because of all the other interesting things it made me think about. You won't let me do it, but I could probably keep you up here until midnight just because my brain is so revved up over all the concepts you've introduced. If you don't mind, I'd like to kind of start by going back to how you started your talk, and then we can move into the platform stuff in a few minutes. One of our students asked, what was the most unexpected obstacle you encountered to being an entrepreneur, and what obstacles do you think all entrepreneurs need to prepare for?
Unexpected would be, I hadn't realized, just because I hadn't focused on it, how incredibly hard fundraising was going to be. Fundraising was brutally, brutally hard. I have a couple metaphors for what I think about that fundraising piece. Is I would tell people it's like giving blood through the skin. Like, I think it may be potentially possible, but it is really hard and horrible. Or pushing an elephant through a door. So sometimes at the end of the fundraising, you've got all these people who are signed up say, yeah, we'll invest, Robin, but to get that blasted check out of them is pushing an elephant through the door. Like, you have to use this incredible brute force and like jam through. So it was hard. And with Zipcar, I'm laughing ruefully. Right now, transportation startups and sharing economy, which Zipcar started both of those categories, they are getting financed at incredible valuations willy-nilly. And I think, wow, when I started, people would ask me, what kind of company are you? Because they would invest in consumer companies or technology companies or wireless companies. And I think, well, duh, we're like all three. What are you thinking? But we didn't fit a category. So that was just the most horrible, hard. Yeah, because also when you're doing a company, you're really passionate about what you're passionate about, which is building the company. And fundraising is this other thing over here that suddenly is on top of you.
So to follow up on that, any advice for our entrepreneurs on how to fundraise other than going to cocktail parties and getting lucky? And how do you think the internet crowdsourcing Peers Inc. will affect the ability to fundraise going forward?
So one thing is I definitely want entrepreneurs to know that you are not a better startup because you've got money from Kleiner Perkins or Sequoia. That is not, getting money from some fancy startup is not the height of startupness. The height of startupness is to not get anybody's money and to control the whole thing yourself. Like, the best is, can you do it, which we call bootstrapping? Can you manage to go get enough revenue in and favors from your friends and as much excess capacity and out of your parents' basement and using your neighbor's kitchen, and can you build a company that way? Because that is absolutely top positive way to be doing a company, as well as anybody's out of money. And you're right, we have things like Kickstarter today, and some of those have turned into companies. We have, crowdsourced individual. So I know one's called WeFunder, so individuals can now raise money. There's something called Angels List, where it's a collaboration it's a Peers Inc. of angels that are easier to find. So you do definitely have a much easier way of finding people who are interested in your topic, who have money, who are in your neighborhood, who, as I say, you will be the right person to the right person at the right time. But really the top best way is to see if you can make sure that you really do need that money. Can you do it in a bootstrap on your own self way?
All right, one more question about fundraising from one of our students. Yeah. Do shows like Shark Tank in any way reflect the real world of attracting investors?
My co-founder of Venium, he loves that show. So he thinks it's spectacular. Shark Tank, the process is nothing at all like raising money. But I think some of their comments are true. Some of their comments will be, is that a defensible position? Or why will anyone buy your thing and not someone else's thing? So I think the questions that they ask in Shark Tank are true. So when I was giving my startup part of the talk, a point that I didn't say, which is kind of like Shark Tank, is when you describe your idea or your company to anybody, to your professor, to your friend, to your mom, every single one of those, you should think of those interactions as your personal consultants, because they are telling you, A, what you should have thought up, what you should know, or, my favorite, when you describe it to your mom and she says, that's dumb, or like asks you, like, why would you do that? Instead of saying, Mom, you are so dumb you don't get it, which I've done, like, that is the stupidest question you ever asked. Why would you think that? They would think that because you personally said it the wrong way. You did not give the right information. You did not give the right context. So I spend a lot of time listening to people's questions, and if you thought any of my sentences in this talk were good, it's because I have listened to what people respond to and what they hear, and I have chosen the best of those. So when you're building your company, everybody is your free advisor, is your free consultant. So if they ask a dumb question, think, wow, why would that ever come to their mind? Clearly I said it the wrong way. Or wow, that was a question I should have known the answer to. So use everyone as your sounding board and get better. Iterate and improve from every one of these interactions.
Okay, I was fascinated by the reference to Duolingo. And in thinking about the PeersInc world and the PeersInc model, as you take your concept from a domestic market internationally, are there unique obstacles that you would, because traditionally when you go abroad there's a whole host of new issues you confront, or does the PeersInc structure effectively make that a different process now?
I think you will see it all over, because think of Uber's battles with country after country after country, and actually city after city after city. So it depends what precisely is going on. Some of those, like Duolingo, will go right over it, and others will be coming with a fight every place.
Okay. If I can turn to Zipcar specifically for a few minutes. You have over 13,000 vehicles in your fleet, you say. How does a company like Zipcar service their vehicles to help ensure that the next customer doesn't get stranded?
So just so you guys don't get misinformation, I left Zipcar a while ago, and Zipcar went public, and then Avis bought them. So now Avis owns Zipcar. But throughout that entire time, maintenance has been hyper-local in each city, and we know the miles on the vehicles, so they always meet the general maintenance requirements. Then we wash them every week, wash and vacuum them once a week, and we do that in place. So in New York City, like everything else that happens in New York City, is done between like midnight and 6 a.m. Those poor cleaners go car to car to car, cleaning and vacuuming. And then, of course, we respond to customers who say, this car is sandy. And when they say, this car is sandy, we see who had the car before, charge them a $50 cleaning fee, and then we clean it.
How do you see car sharing platforms embracing, not embracing, moving towards either driverless cars or electric cars?
So I see those are two different questions, as you know. Zipcar had, in 2002, we put our first 2 electric cars in the fleet, courtesy of Toyota, who wanted us to use them. And what was fascinating to me was they were the last 2 cars in the fleet to go out. Like, everything would go out, and then those electric cars would go out because people were scared to drive them. Just worried, scared. I think the Prius, being a hybrid, has taken away a lot of the fear around electric cars, and also people have touched them more. So I see car sharing as a perfect place for electric cars, because people have this crazy fear of, we call it range anxiety, fear of running out of electricity, and it's completely wrong 99% of the time, because they in fact aren't going a long distance. So it's really good in a fleet of cars so that you know that, oh yeah, I'm just going in town, which is almost all your trips, and I use it then, and then if I'm scared because I'm going 500 miles, I'll go to another car and use it. So it fits kind of very nicely into the shared vehicle piece. If I were giving a talk to a transportation audience, the autonomous cars, the self-driving cars, those are going to happen at a pace that you guys are totally unaware of. I think we'll be seeing them. 2016, Google has a plan to do a pilot, I think maybe in Austin, where regular people will be using those cars in a regular way. And I think in the 5 to 10 years, we're going to see a lot of them. And I think the transition is going to be quite fast. So it's going to completely disrupt a lot of things. So not only does it disrupt the car industry, because if we share trips and shared cars with autonomous vehicles, i.e. you really only pay not only for what you're going to use in terms of time, but you only pay for your seat, which will be as cheap as a bus pass, a bus trip. So for $2.50 every one of your trips, we only need 10% of the cars we have today, which is a terrifying thing to the car manufacturers and a boon to big cities, because all of that parking will be gone. So streets and parking lots, of which you guys have got a lot, will now be available for something else. So it's really going to transform the world. And then the worst part is the hit on labor. So all those people who are drivers will not have jobs, and all the people who are manufacturing those cars. So it's a very depending on which side of the seat you are. If you're a person who's taking a bus to work and changing 3 times, it's taking you an hour and a half, or if you're a person spending $9,000 a year on a car, or if you're a person who has a credit car, this is a fantastic world for you, because you will go point to point, your point-to-point public transit system, fantastic. If you are a car manufacturer, it's very scary. If you're a driver, it's very scary. And from an emission standpoint, I think they will be all electric, which will be fantastic for the environment.
Okay. As I heard you describe Zipcar, and then you transitioned into the PureZync model, it seems to me Zipcar is actually a hybrid between a traditional model and a true PureZync platform, in that you've tapped into slicing in a different way that allows you to tap into the excess capacity, but you still have inventory, servicing, all these other things that something like Uber doesn't, that is really tapping into everybody's resource base. And so I'm just wondering, how do you see things like Uber affecting car sharing activities, Zipcar? Do you see it in that same way, that it was a transition to something that is more diverse and robust?
Yes and no. So what I think of the difference between Zipcar and Uber is in the peer-to-peer sharing economy, and Zipcar is the sharing economy. But in a larger way, I want people to think about the fact that Facebook, which has got nothing to do with cars or things, is a PureZync company and is this collaborative company. And so I think there's a much broader thing. So Zipcar definitely fits into that broader thing. But if we think of peer-to-peer economies, Uber is part of a peer-to-peer economy. And when Uber becomes an autonomous car company, the peers will be out. So we're in a very transitional spot right now, and the future of employment and the future of unemployment is it's a time where people are both more valued for their unique personal assets, and I think for that it's a very exciting and much more rewarding time. But we have a lot of mechanization to go. So I don't think Uber is at all the end state. I think we're going to go another thing beyond again. So there's lots of permutations.
You just mentioned, and you talked about in your talk, the economic effects of these changes. You talked about in a question or two past how you view this, whether it's scary or not, maybe depends on where you sit. You talked about the growth in income disparity.
Yep.
And when I look at some of this peer-to-peer activity that's been happening, I'm struck by 2 things. One, a lot of people currently use this, not all, you've talked about the 30% freelancers, but a lot of people use it as an income supplement. It's a nice way to take that wage stagnation, up your lifestyle a little, do a little better. And that's great as long as you have your base job. but as Piers Inc. explodes, don't the hotels go out of business? Don't the car manufacturers lay off people? Don't the taxi cabs go out of business? And so in the long run, is this a plus or a negative for all these peers getting involved?
I get asked this question a lot. And if we think about where I closed this thing, I want to say the Piers Inc. paradigm has no values and it's amoral. But because the economics are so compelling and the innovation, the pace and ease of innovation is so compelling, it is going to happen. Whether you or I like it or not is irrelevant. Companies are going to be shaped this way because it is so, so, so compelling. So I want to say that part is a given. If I go back to part of what you're saying, is it the base and supplement? For some people it is. There's a lot of stories where people were they transitioned out of their boring, hated full-time job into this brand new one full-time because it was way better. They like doing it better, they're happier, they make more money. So it can flip that way too. I've talked to a bunch of taxi drivers and Uber drivers and Lyft drivers. I now quiz them all, those poor guys. And what's interesting to me is I get all kinds of answers. That, some people said, yeah, I was an Uber driver and I couldn't take it because the insurance is so bad and I had no health insurance, and so I moved back to be a taxi driver. Other people say, wow, I love it because I'm really I talked to this guy in New York, he really did he did manufacture, he bought stuff in China and he sold it here. He did clothing retail. I'm sorry about this squealing. And he was driving as an Uber driver so he could make $600 in a very short period of time to buy his plane ticket, so he was going to go to China and do his purchasing and come back. So he had a financial goal that he could make, and he was using it for that. So there's a diversity of people, and we're going to have this different thing. When I was writing this book and I was thinking through the trends, something that totally, I'm sorry, if I take this away, does it less? Will that help? Are you guys hearing that little high-piercing squeal? Yes? It's hurting my ears. Okay, how about this? A little better.
It's probably me.
Okay. When I was writing the book and I was understanding how the trends played through, I just thought, oh my God, this is like terrifying. And that's when I started thinking about, and I wrote, and I was shocked that I talked about, I said, wow, I think we need to have a universal basic income, that everyone gets paid $1,000 a month because you are an American citizen. Done. And then you will want to make more money because that's going to be like rock bottom, but you'll have this cushion. And I thought, I was amazed that I would suggest something like that, but I couldn't see any way out. And in the last 6 months, I have read so many op-eds, and there's so much conversation right now going on around the future of employment, what are we going to do about this basic income. So I think it's now starting. You guys will start paying attention. You'll see this, a little buzz around the idea of basic income. And some cities are doing experiments right now on whether they're doing A/B testing with having people with basic income, and when you do that, you take away, all the other social safety, you take away welfare, and you take away all these other things. And which way do people? Because if you have a basic income, now you are not so angry when the car manufacturing company goes out, because the car manufacturing company is going to collapse. And so now you can go say, let me go try something else. That gives you the ability to go try new things, and you are not stuck in the job that you despise, doing the useless thing that, in fact, I've just been looking, as I've been thinking about this, I've been paying attention to jobs that have no value, which includes the guy who guards the exit when I leave the airport. I think, imagine having that as your job, 40 hours a week exit guarding. So you're looking at me with such skepticism. I was also reading an article about women who work late night cleaners, how there's a huge amount of sexual predation and harassment, and they can't quit those jobs because they need the money, they need a job, and they're unprotected. And so if we had a basic income, you'd say, hey, you know what? You have to treat me better, and you have to do a better job. I can't work in unsafe work conditions, because otherwise I'm not going to work for you. So it can transform things. And I was talking to a politician in California, and he was from a small town. He was like the mayor of that small town. And I said, what do you think about this? And he said, wow, we would save so much money. Because he said the cost of the welfare and all the benefits, plus his staff to administer it, if you just took all that out, he thinks that you would be paying people and it would be the same thing. So I don't know. I'm not an expert in that. I've only just started thinking about it, but I think, wow, we are moving into a place of such high productivity and such high, fast pace of transition. Can we really promise the guy who gets laid off from his manufacturing job, is he going to get a job in the new economy in the next 6 months? I'm surprised at myself, frankly. But I look and I think, I don't see how we're going to get out of it.
Well, that raises, I think, two interesting points for me. Let me start with the first one. You talked about 30% of people freelancing. We talked about people being displaced. Do you have any sense of whether these freelancers doing these multiple jobs are doing it because they want to, and obviously some percent are, versus they need to be doing multiple jobs to get by because that's how they survive?
Yeah, so there's a big outfit that I've forgotten the name of that has done nationwide surveys on this. And so while some people might get into that freelance economy for different reasons, 87% of the people who are in it prefer it over full-time, over their employment with one employer. So I think once you experience that flexibility, it's much nicer to be in control of your life.
It's a scary leap to take, though, obviously.
And wouldn't it be nice if we had the safety net and social benefits so that you weren't leaving yourself without a dentist?
Now, if I can go to the other thing that intrigued me about this, you've talked about how this is inevitable. The Peers Inc. model, it's so efficient, it's bound to happen. You talked about how going back to the 70s, we've seen productivity increase, but it's not being shared broadly. And it occurs to me, we've seen larger and larger corporations, so, money flows to the top of those, money flows to the shareholders. And then as we've turned into an information economy, a product can be distributed at virtually no cost once it's created, and whoever owns the intellectual property kind of has that whole rights in there. Doesn't Peers Inc. exacerbate this in many ways? I mean, not the 3 cents versus 9 cents for the translation, but the platform builder is willingly getting a whole bunch of people to work for him or her at virtually no cost. In fact, they're excited about it because they're making a little extra money, but they're aggregating the bulk of the wealth because you're doing so many transactions on such a large scale.
Yes. So I've been thinking about this, and I don't have the answer, but if I think about these platform companies, there's 3 areas of value creation embedded in them. One is the creation of the platform. One is creation of the platform, which deserves a great return on that investment. It's a high-risk thing. It costs a lot of money, hundreds of millions of dollars to do. So that's value created. They absolutely positively deserve some value for doing that. Then we think of each individual. If I think about Airbnb, the first person who rented their house on Airbnb made money, and the second person made money, and the 10th made money, and the 1,000th made money. And Airbnb probably didn't make any money until, I'm going to make this up, 100,000 transactions or 200,000 transactions, because they had to build the platform. So they lost money for a long time, whereas each individual, each peer was making money on each one. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. They're not going to do it if they don't make money. So there's a third place where there's value creation, and I see that as the network effect, right? So Airbnb is a network, and that's why it's fantastic, because all of these people all around the world think now Airbnb is every place. Right now, the platform creator is getting the network effect. They get the value for that. But if we think of who creates that network effect, it's all of us individuals. So I feel like, is there a way, and I'm just saying these words, I don't have the answer, is there a way that we could be giving that network effect value to the people who were the ones who were generating it, instead of the platform person who deserves and did a great job with the platform and deserves a lot of money for that, but they're getting everything except for what the individual's taking. And I don't think that that's a fair sharing of value, because in fact we are the ones who deliver the network effect. So you're right. In chapter 9 of this book, I talk about one of the interesting things about these platforms and the value is he who finances the platform creates the rules of engagement for everyone. So all of these platforms have rules for engagement. And it's the platform that's creating those rules, and ultimately the board of directors who's saying, and the people of finance who say, this is how we're going to create these rules. So it is some of these platforms have really bad behavior around how they treat the individual peers. They absolutely do treat them in very bad ways because they create the rules and they can change the rules any day of the week they want. Some platforms are run by fantastic CEOs, and I think they've got fantastic values, and they don't screw around with their workers, but they could die someday. They could get fired, but there's what is the protection? So as we move forward, we need to think about that. And something happened today, and then last spring, Etsy became a B corporation, which is called a beneficial corporation. And a beneficial corporation means that its mission statement is both financial and social. So it can't just follow the money. It also has to treat its workers well, and it also has to do well by the environment, and it also has to treat its customers well. So they became a B corporation, and then they went public, which was to say that people, the finance world and investors were willing to buy into a B corporation, and it was fine. And I just learned that yesterday, Kickstarter became a B corporation. And so they've decided that they want to make sure that they want to preserve values around people and planet in addition to their financial ones. So that's one option. There are some other ones that are too complicated for me to say quickly.
Well, clearly we'll have to rethink some of the basic tenets of corporate law and who duties are owed to as this economy changes in these dramatic ways. I can see how Peers Inc. applies. I mean, we've got lots of examples to services, consumables, Airbnb, Uber Chef. I can see how it applies to kind of major consumer products like a car or an apartment that have excess capacity. Is there a place for this in the creation of consumer goods? Is there a Peers Inc. model for the creation of goods, or is it just kind of the secondary marketing of them?
So there's a company that I profile in the book called Quirky, and Quirky is a crowd-sourced idea generator, and I think there's other ones, but this is just one example. And so Quirky recently partnered with GE, and in particular, that particular partnership is consumer products that are going to leverage wireless and your cell phone, wireless devices and Bluetooth. And so that is wholly done for that. But I think that there's many more of them. They're just not coming to mind. But innovation and creativity is a place, actually, big companies like Unilever and Procter & Gamble have big arms. They have big departments where they're looking for ideas outside from the public. So they have set up systems where people they said, here's our problems. If you have a solution to our problems, tell us about it. And here's how you can wend your way in through a very sharp funnel. But so there is a lot of outsourcing for good ideas.
Okay, if I can ask you one more question. When you consider 7 billion people on the planet, the Peers Inc. revolution occurring, the internet, there's going to be a lot of platform builders. I don't know if that's 100,000 or 1 million or 10 million or 100 million. And quite frankly, I can't remember the last time I added an app to my phone. I mean, I got the ones I need. I'm an old fogey. How do you stand out from the crowd? How do you stand out from all that noise?
I want to say that I'm an old fogey. That is absolutely, when I started Zipcar, the ability to grab attention was much, much easier than it is today. And so I have one child that is incredibly skilled at social media. She's done 2 videos in her life, and they both went viral and have more than 1 million views. So what she tells me is that if you are really good at something, because of social media, it will fly. So there is a meritocracy, and meritorious things do catch.
But there's a whole bunch of things that, that we do all the time that are just okay. And that is one of the challenges for hyper-local things, is that it's a global world and we are competing with the entire globe. So the best ones rise to the top.
Well, but I'll follow up on that. But do they? You showed that ramp up curve for
Takes a
Airbnb
while.
and stuff. They start out low funded. There's a lot of them out there.
Yep.
Somebody wins, but is it necessarily the best one? I remember when I was a teenager, the first Macintosh came out, and Apple almost went belly up because IBM and others were able to convince the world that that wasn't a serious computer.
Well, so here's, I do believe that marketing is everything, and my staff would laugh if they heard me say this, all my staff over the last 30 years, because I've said this 1,000 times, marketing is everything. And so what's interesting about social media is that sometimes it can trigger that marketing is everything, but we also know that dollars buy marketing, and that those dollars that buy marketing win. So I look at things like democracy, and I say, wow, democracy is pretty much dead because we're good at marketers and we can pay for marketing, right? It's just a very straightforward thing. So I guess, yeah, there's these two paths. One is he who's got the money, markets the most, convinces people that's the best thing, and that's one path. And the other is social media, and if you really were exceptional, you would beat out. Just let me say one thing about Etsy, which is now public and worth some billions. They were an outgrowth of eBay. So eBay was not responding to people making things by hand's concern, and so it was the disgruntled hand manufacturers and crafters that offered this as a niche that became Etsy. So I think there's the ability to take these big companies and say, and actually around Uber and Lyft now, there's companies. So if I think of Uber and Lyft, they started on my car's excess capacity. Like, you would not put a car in Toledo or Pasadena when you launched, because who knew if I was going to get a return on that investment, right? As a company, you wouldn't have bought a car. But all of us said, I'm going to drive that, on my free time and with my own used car, and so, yeah, I'll try it, and we'll give it a shot. If it works, great. If it doesn't, whatever. Now that those companies are very, very successful, in their most successful markets, new companies have started that will lease you a car by the week to go drive Uber and Lyft. And so they're doing car leasing by the week because it's so successful. But that, of course, would not work when those companies, Uber or Lyft, started, and it wouldn't work in small markets. But in a place where the demand is already happening, or people on Airbnb, people are now buying apartments to rent on Airbnb. But for Airbnb's inception, that would never have happened, right? It's too risky. So this excess capacity idea comes into play in different places, shapes through the life cycle of a company.
Any additional things you'd like to comment on or share? Or?
I feel like it's been a long night. Thank you for staying, and it was absolutely my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin, for providing us with this fuel for thought tonight. If you wish to purchase Robin's book, Peers Inc., you may do so in the hallway outside of the theater. As Robin indicated, she's happy to sign your book as well. So if you're interested, please meet out there in a few minutes. I'd like to thank the Jessup Scott Honors students who submitted questions. I'll leave you one to ponder as we conclude our evening. Among our students tonight, which one of you is going to make a positive difference in your field of study so that you're going to be invited back up here in a few years to be one of our distinguished speakers? I hope you've enjoyed this evening as much as I have, and I mean that very sincerely. And we hope to see you back next month on October 22nd for Richard Rousseau. Have a great evening.
There's a drum line in my heartbeat. I know exactly what from